Welcome back to What's the Big Book Actually Saying, our very last video for this entire series of videos, Step 12, Part 5, where we're continuing to look at what the Big Book is suggesting in the chapter Working with Others on how to practice the principles in all our affairs. We've got up to family quarrels of new members. Let's just jump straight in. When working with a member and their family, you should take care not to participate in their quarrels. I learned about this in my very first experience of sponsoring the hard way. I should say again, this is not necessarily just about sponsorship. It's not as if members, plural, can't help a member. You may spoil your chance of being helpful if you do. If we don't look like we're practicing the principles, spiritual principles in all our affairs, if we look like a meddler, that's how they'll see AA. But urge upon a member's family that they have been a very sick person and should be treated accordingly. You should warn against arousing resentment or jealousy. You should point out that their defects of character are not going to disappear overnight. They're on a path, they're on a journey. Show them that they have entered upon a period of growth, change, whichever word you want to use, right? They're transitioning. Ask them to remember, when they are impatient, the blessed fact of their sobriety. Hey, they're sober, but if you want them to stay sober and not get drunk again for all that craziness to return, let them grow and change. It doesn't happen overnight, but at least they're pointing themselves in the right direction. I've had conversations with family members of AA along those lines. And it often starts with that telephone line call where the family member rings up on behalf of the alcoholic they're concerned about. And sometimes you're sharing advice similar to this with them from that very first initial contact with AA. Hey, if they do choose to get to a meeting, it's not as if there's a magic wand here we just tap them on the head with. It'll be a period of transition and change for the entire family, not just for that alcoholic. If you've been successful in solving your own domestic problems, tell the newcomer's family how that was accomplished. And that's a really good suggestion, one that I've tapped into on more than one occasion. Let's look about being around booze. Let's now pivot towards this sober life and where alcohol sits in it, which is it's a big topic of discussion. I've been to so many newcomers meetings around where I live where this is one of the subjects that comes up fairly regularly. Assuming we are spiritually fit, the Big Book says, we can do all sorts of things alcoholics are not supposed to do. People have said we must not go where liquor is served. We must not have it in our homes. We must shun friends who drink. We must avoid moving pictures which show drinking scenes, or Netflix, or Stan. We must not go into bars. Our friends must hide their bottles if we go to their houses. We mustn't think or be reminded about alcohol at all. Here's what the founding members of AA have to say about that stuff. Our experience shows that is not necessarily so. It might be a really good suggestion for someone who was drinking last week. If they're brand new, and it might be a good suggestion. But let's look at what the spiritually fit, hey, we've turned a corner style alcoholics suggest. Let's have a look at their life now. We meet these conditions every day. In other words, to help alcoholics who are drinking, they had to be around alcohol, right? An alcoholic who cannot meet them still has an alcoholic mind. There is something the matter with their spiritual status. I actually read that first sentence wrong. We meet these conditions every way. It doesn't mean just being around alcohol. It's that we meet these conditions head on and we are safe from alcohol. My apologies for that. With that in mind, an alcoholic who cannot meet these conditions, in other words, be around alcohol, still has an alcoholic mind. This is their point. There is something the matter with their spiritual status. So if we feel like a drink, if we are triggered by being around alcohol, the smell of it or the sight of it, God forbid, not the taste of it, then there's something not alcoholically wrong with us. The alcoholic disease may be sort of starting to get a little bit restless, irritable, and discontented. It may be starting to speak to us, but it's actually our spiritual status that is a trigger for that. Their only chance for sobriety would be someplace, I love this bit of this is almost like a stand-up routine, would be like the Greenland ice camp. And even there, ice cap, and even there an Eskimo might turn up with a bottle of scotch and ruin everything. It's such a beautiful analogy. You can't outrun the bottle. What we must do is run vigorously towards the thing that means we don't have to outrun alcohol, and that is God. Ask any person who has sent their partner to distant places on the theory they would escape the alcohol problem. So true. And then it moves on to avoidance of alcohol and how it can work for a time. And no doubt, if you've been in the rooms any length of time, you'll know people who are dry for a while. There's that wonderful story and more about alcoholism about the guy who was sober for decades, but as soon as he started drinking, he was off like a rocket and dead a few years later. So this idea of avoiding alcohol, swearing off using willpower. Let's have a look at what the big book says about that. Now we're talking about alcoholics who've had a spiritual awakening. In our belief, any scheme of combating alcoholism which proposes to shield the sick person from temptation is doomed to failure. So this is all about the person who's sworn off and is using willpower to stay sworn off, and using techniques like avoidance. If the alcoholic tries to shield themselves, they may succeed for a time, but they usually wind up with a bigger explosion than ever. We call that a bust these days. We have tried these methods. I know I did, and I couldn't keep it up for more than 2 days. Whatever your relationship is with swearing off, with willpower, then busting, what we're learning here is that the founding members have tried it. What they saw and what I've seen in my 10 years of being around AA is the same. The bust is usually more cataclysmic than not. These attempts to do the impossible have always failed. Always failed. Because it's impossible. Step one, powerless over alcohol. So our rule is not to avoid a place where there is drinking if we have a legitimate reason for being there. So this is the life principle we carry forward. It's all about the reason why we're there. Okay, our intent. That includes bars, nightclubs, dances, receptions, weddings, even plain, ordinary, and I love this word, whoopee parties. I don't know the specifics of what makes a whoopee party as opposed to a nightclub or a wedding or whatever, but I don't know, maybe it's a house party, I don't know. To a person who has had experience with an alcoholic, this may seem like tempting providence, capital P, by the way, so that may be an allusion to a higher power of sorts, but it isn't tempting providence, capital P. You will note, it continues, that we made an important qualification, and that was why you're there. Therefore, ask yourself on each occasion, have I any good social, business, or personal reason for going to this place? Is it a birthday party for a close personal friend or family member? Am I there to show support and love, for example? Or am I expecting to steal a little vicarious pleasure from the atmosphere of such places? Is it just me wanting to tempt fate, to feel like my life hasn't changed, and that little bit of good stuff that I enjoyed about my drinking way of life, I'm tapping into again, that kind of stuff. Then it continues, I'm jumping over a little bit here, trying to get to the point quicker, but be sure you are on solid spiritual ground before you start. This is why we have the book Living Sober, by the way. If you read the first section of Living Sober, which is largely it qualifying its existence within the pantheon of AA literature. It's for those people who haven't had a spiritual awakening yet, and the stuff that we can do in the very short interim term prior to discovering God to stay happy, well, maybe not happy, but safe and sober. But, those of us who keep coming back and working the steps and finding God, we achieve something better than those suggestions, which is the solid spiritual God-conscious ground, the way of life that is indescribably wonderful, as the big book suggests. So, what we've got to make sure we're on. We need to be on solid spiritual ground before you start, and that your motive in going is thoroughly good. Do I have a good motive? This is part of my way of life, to be of use to others, to be good. To practice moral psychology by turning up. Do not think of what you will get out of the occasion. Think of what you can bring to it. Okay? St. Francis Prayer, step 11, through self-forgetting one finds. And I found again and again, by using this way of living and thinking and perceiving, I found a purpose to the most gratuitous social events where before they were just gratuitous social events. I find a reason for being there that is God-driven, not me-driven. It's an interesting thing. But if you are shaky, you would better work with another alcoholic instead. So here's the rule. And by the way, it isn't get to a meeting necessarily. It isn't call your sponsor. Perhaps it is. They're another alcoholic. But this is the chapter about passing the message on, not having it passed to us so much. So, I think the idea of getting to a meeting to share your story and help a newcomer. So when I'm struggling, for example, and of course I still do, I go to a beginners meeting where I know beginners will be there so I can actually share my story. I can carry the AA message of recovery in a very pure sense. I can talk about the allergy. I can talk about the obsession and really do this carrying the message of our solution to those that haven't heard it yet. That's a really powerful cure-all for me. Getting out and about, spiritual and sober. Let's look at just, being a human being on planet Earth with God in our back pocket. Why sit with a long face in places where there is drinking, sighing about the good old days? If it is a happy occasion, try to increase the pleasure of those there. So there's the helping other theme. We knew it was going to be there. And here are some dot points. If a business occasion, go out and attend to your business enthusiastically. Be customer focused, all that stuff. If you are with a person who wants to eat in a bar, by all means go along. In Australia, a Parmigiana is at least $2 or $3 cheaper in a bar than anywhere else, so I'm not going to miss out on a cheap feed just because I'm an alcoholic. I'm not saying I'm in AA so I can actually save money on, Parmigianas and a good burger with fries. But hey, if my friends want to go there, I have no problem with that. Let your friends know they are not going to change their habits on your account. This is a really big deal. So often when people know I'm an alcoholic, they'll always go, "Are you okay if I drink?" And I'm going, "Yeah, please drink my share if you wish." That's fine. I'm just grateful you're not an alcoholic. And I'm quite happy to just be a recovered alcoholic, and I'm grateful for that. So go crazy. And if you get too drunk, I'll drive you home. At a proper time and place, explain to all your friends why alcohol disagrees with you. And, this is the public information part of being in a 12-step program. I find sharing with my friends what my alcoholism was like, the allergy and the obsession, it sometimes gets passed on to someone else who turns up at a meeting or gives me a call. If you do this thoroughly, few people will ask you to drink. And it's also a way of making sure the offers for a beer or a wine stop coming. It's just about being honest and normal. And that's the most important word for me. It's just normal to share with people I have in my social circle who I am and what I'm about. I don't wish to feel like a spy who's undercover. I've got to be me, right? So there's a lot of advantages in being okay and normal about my disease. While you were drinking, you were withdrawing from life little by little. So true. In my case, now you are getting back into the social life of this world. So this is an important part of our recovery, it seems to be suggesting. We need to get back out there sober and find a way of doing it that benefits us through benefiting others. Don't start to withdraw again just because your friends drink liquor, all right? That's just another way of, and I found this in the beginning. Oh no, they'll be drinking and I won't be. But I really wasn't that spiritually fit. And now that I feel I'm closer to being spiritually fit on a continuous basis, this issue of withdrawing has gone away. Your job now is to be at the place where you may be of maximum helpfulness to others. So never hesitate to go anywhere if you can be helpful. And look, I've said it before a couple of minutes ago, even being the driver, helping people who have been drinking out what a great way to be of service to them and to show that I'm okay about their drinking. And in a way, my own, my lack of drinking, I'm okay about that too. This is just a normal thing now. You should not hesitate to visit the most sordid spot on earth on such an errand. That sounds like fun. going to the travel agent, hey, what's the most sordid spot on earth? I'm spiritually fit. Sign me up. Keep on the firing line of life with these motives and God will keep you unharmed. So, suddenly we're the tip of the spear in regards to helpfulness. And at times I've found being at the places that perhaps I was scared to go are places where I can be of great use to others. And that leads to this next section on the life of an older, sober member. And I still feel at 10 and a half years, I don't know whether I am an older, sober member yet. I'm not a newcomer anymore. I'm sort of sitting in this no person's land in the middle. It's a nice place to be. Many of us keep liquor in our homes. We have it here. We often need it to carry green recruits through a severe hangover. I often get given wine as a gift for whatever the reason. I like regifting it. It saves me a few dollars at Christmas and birthdays, but but equally it can be important for this, let's call it a medical reason. Green recruits may need a top up if they choose to, lumber up on our front door. Some of us still serve it to our friends, provided they are not alcoholic, and my wife and I have done that. If we've got, at our wedding, for example, we made sure we had alcohol and coffee and soft drinks. And it was funny, one venue immediately went kind of cold on us when we said we were AA members and there'll be many other AA members there. And I could almost see their faces going, oh, we're not going to make much money off the bar here. We sort of said, but there will be some drinkers coming. And so it was lovely that we could do that. And again, non-alcoholics, seeing alcoholics be completely normal around alcohol while they were drinking, what a gift to them. And our own recovery as we become more and more normal and okay with where we are as sober, recovered alcoholics. But some of us think we should not serve liquor to anyone. And I agree with this principle too. My wife and I had alcohol at our wedding, but we're never going to argue that question with other alcoholics. We feel, and I feel, she feels, really in sync here. We feel that each family, in the light of their own circumstances, ought to decide for themselves. This power of choice is marvellous, isn't it? We are careful never to show intolerance or hatred of drinking as an institution. Oh, so important. Experience shows that such an attitude is not helpful to anyone. And this goes to our traditions. We have no opinion on outside issues. And that includes going, oh, anyone who drinks is bad. The alcohol industry is bad. No, it's not. What was bad was my allergy to alcohol and where it took me. But, those people over there drinking in moderation, power to them, and that's a personal member's view. It's not an AA view. But it is important that, the spirit of intolerance it's not spiritual. Hatred is not spiritual. We've just done a whole bunch of stuff at step 4 and 5 to ditch the hatred and replace it with love and tolerance. So it needs to be shown towards alcohol itself. Every new alcoholic looks for this spirit among us, okay? So they'll come into the rooms, in other words, and be looking to see if we're judgy judgerson. They're looking for that, so the founders are saying, and is immensely relieved when he or she, I apologise, finds we are not witch burners. If you're not alcoholic, drink away. But if you are alcoholic, think about how unmanageable your life is. Maybe you might want to keep coming to a few more meetings, have a listen, see what you think. A spirit of intolerance might repel alcoholics whose lives could have been saved had it not been for such stupidity. We would not even do the cause of temperate drinking any good, for not one drinker in 1,000 likes to be told anything about alcohol by one who hates it. And by that, I think it's saying, the normal non-alcoholic person hates being told what to do just as much as we do as alcoholics. Then we get to this little last section of working with others. And I call this the founder's hope for AA. It reads like that. Someday we hope that Alcoholics Anonymous will help the public, not alcoholics per se, but everyone, to a better realisation of the gravity of the alcohol problem. But we shall be of little use if our attitude is one of bitterness or hostility. Drinkers will not stand for it. And then it goes into an italics bit, which we know means read up, listen up, pay attention. After all, our problems were of our own making. Bottles were only a symbol. Besides, we have stopped fighting anybody or anything. We have to. And look, I'm not going to hold you up anymore. I've had you for long enough across this video series. Have a happy, sober day. Happy, sober life. Cheers.